In the final part of our 3-part interview, we finish our conversation with the Bartz family, including my sister Brittany Bartz, her husband Will, and his parents Merlin and Lisa. Then, 1 year later, I catch up with the Bartzes to see how they feel about the events of 2020 and the election ahead. Well, I think this is a good segue into the final question that I want to ask, which is, what are the things that you want to see out of the country that you are not currently seeing?
I guess I am of the persuasion that the best government is the smallest government. So I think at a local level, you know your people and you can help them. Or even at a state level, I think it's better to make decisions for the people. I mean, we're talking about agriculture and how, people in California are writing laws for people in Iowa, and it just doesn't make any sense. And so I think part of the reason that I would say if I'm going to put myself in a box, libertarian, but more Republican, is I think that a lot of times politicians focus on keeping their jobs, and so they want to make it seem like they're doing something, and so they keep doing more and more and more and more, but I think it's not helping anybody, because our country's like as big as half of Europe, if not all of Europe, if you put it all in. And so you have so many different groups of people being told what to do from a federal...
It's like a one-size-fits-all.
Yeah, they're trying to put everything together, whereas if they did less or let the states do more, I feel like it would work out better for everyone. And so I feel like maybe more people are of my persuasion that we need to do less in order to do more, or do more at a local level to help than at a federal level. And so I would ideally like to see less. I'd like to see teachers not having to meet these standards per se, or having more flexible standards, or putting emphasis not just on reading and math, but on other things like social studies. Because they're just, the reason we have an education system was to have educated voters, was the whole point of having public education. And now it's a lot of times almost gotten rid of. So I think power needs to be at a smaller level in order to be able to do the most good. And so I guess in my feeling, that's where the Republican Party is more right than the Democrat Party, is because I feel like the more you do, you're going to cause harm somewhere. Money doesn't come from nowhere. None of these, everyone doesn't fit into these boxes, or it's not, everything sounds good on paper, but in reality, a lot of times it doesn't work out that way. And so you just have more and more and more bureaucracy, and
that you have to pay for, all those salaries.
Yeah, and I don't know that it does anyone any good. So I guess I would hope that we'd cut across the board a lot of stuff.
I guess I'm of the persuasion that no matter who gets elected to whatever office, ultimately what my life comes down to, like what I do for myself. I think a lot of people put too much emphasis on, especially the president, and how and thinking that voting one way or another for one person is just going to be this life-altering event. And it's like everything's going to be great after so-and-so gets elected, or my life is going to end after so-and-so gets elected. If you have that attitude that you're going to let it affect you, then it's going to affect you. I think there's this big frenzy, or like unnecessary frenzy over a lot of this stuff. And I think there's certain groups of people that probably want it to be that way, because there's a lot of money that's made off of that the media makes off of it, and that politicians make, and so maybe I guess that would be a good answer. Like I wish that I hope that more Americans come to the realization that they're in control of their life. They don't have to, I guess, cry when Barack Obama gets elected, right?
It's like the South
Lisa,
Park
what's your answer to the question?
Okay.
Or your ideal
I
version
think
of the country?
what scares me the most is the debt and our fiscal situation. And you just got to get it under control, and you can't be telling people, if I'm elected, I'm going to do this for you, and you're going to have, get your college paid for and have free Medicare and all this. And it's like, where's the money coming from? It's like all of our money's going into a black hole.
At some point, this is why I think I mentioned the Gorsuch-Kavanaugh appointments. We've historically, over the last, 40, 50 years, had a very activist court that frankly in my estimation, went beyond interpreting the Constitution in relationship to the law, and actually were almost in some respects writing law, which is not the job of the judiciary and in the three branches of government. So one of the things I think with the appointments to the federal court is that you will see better interpretation of the law and how the Constitution as the umbrella affects the law. And I think you'll see a less activist court. And if you see a less activist court, I think what will happen is you will see a less intrusive government. So in some respects, I'm going the same direction these other three folks have talked about.
Folks.
But
these strangers. Sorry.
It's getting late.
Rude. I know.
It's getting late. But I'm my approach is a little bit different, because I believe that if you get government out of the way, rugged individualism of America will, in many respects, take care of itself. And hopefully we get a renaissance of entrepreneurial spirit. We get a renaissance of more local and state government making those decisions, as the vacuum of the federal government is created. Because frankly, if the federal government got out of something tomorrow, it would create a vacuum, and there would be some folks that would say, oh my God, what's going to happen? But I think you would see a resurgence of a stronger state government and stronger local governments, which I think is back to where we need to be from the whole concept of federalism. That you have these different layers of government that do different things. And we have historically been moving in a stronger federal government and a weaker state and local government. And maybe the court will move us to a weaker federal government. And I don't mean that in a negative respect, but a weaker federal government and a stronger state and local government. And I like that idea, because I think the government that's best for the people is the government that's closest to the people.
All right, I am joined by the Bartz family. Thank you, Bartzes, for sitting down with me tonight. Appreciate you taking the time. How do you feel specifically about Trump's leadership through the pandemic?
I don't think it's been as bad as some people want to project it to be. He said some strange things from time to time, but overall, I don't feel like it was really bad. I just think it's a really tough job, and you get a lot of criticism from hordes of people that never had to be in that type of situation where they had to make life or death decisions. So it's hard to do that job when everybody's criticizing you all the time.
I guess what stands out to me isn't necessarily his leadership, but things he was maybe criticized for that ended up being either a good idea or not really the dramatic thing that it was made out to be. For example, being called xenophobic for for implementing a travel ban, which at the beginning that's what he was being called, and yet I think the people that were saying that now, they wouldn't say it again, or they won't admit to having said that. I remember, watching him being criticized for claiming that he would have Navy medical ships in New York and LA by a certain date, and these people saying that it was unrealistic and that it was never going to happen in that time frame, and then turns out that it actually did happen when he said it was going to happen. And then ironically, did they not even end up having to treat that many people? I think there's been a lot of things that were overblown. Whether it's these Navy medical ships that end up not having to treat that many people, or all these medical tents that ended up having to be just being shut down because they were never overrun like people projected them to be.
So generally feeling like he's unfairly criticized or unproportionally criticized compared to the things that actually happen.
Yeah, I suppose so. I think he's probably unfairly criticized in a lot of areas, not just the handling of COVID-19.
Well, I want to ask you sort of towards the tail end about the election, but before I do, I did want to ask about, I remember when I was growing up, that Minneapolis was such a big part of our lives, and having the death of George Floyd be so close to North Iowa. How did the events of his death and the sort of events that preceded after that affect you, or how do you feel about them?
As far as the whole George Floyd situation, I think the thing that sticks out to me most is I don't remember hearing from anyone that I spoke to on either side of the political spectrum, come to the defense of the police officer that knelt on George Floyd. There was, in past incidences, I think there's always been these people that are very quick to jump to conclusions, and then there's been those that kind of, want to maybe get the full story before deciding, how they feel on it. What was interesting about this was I felt like no matter who it was that I was talking to, Republican or Democrat, however you want to put it, everybody thought that what happened was wrong. The unfortunate thing was that the idea of everybody kind of being together on this page as far as this shouldn't have been handled that way. I heard somebody say that could have been a really good time for actual change to take place, because you had so many people that agreed, this is wrong, something should be done about it. And then the unfortunate thing was that a lot of people kind of, I guess didn't take advantage of the opportunity to unify, and instead took advantage of a situation to, I guess, get something out of it for themselves. And I know that the majority of people that are in Minneapolis, or really anywhere in the country right now, the majority of people that are protesting, I know aren't, necessarily, they're not, vandalizing or hurting people. But there are those that kind of have taken advantage of, whether you want to call it the cover of protest, to, carry out their personal agenda or what have you. And so what's happened because of that is it's starting to polarize the two sides rather than bringing them together, where, you know, everybody kind of was, from what I could tell, of the mindset that like we should change this or do something about this. And now the two groups have been kind of separated by the, you know, radicals, I guess, for lack of a better term.
You know, it's ironic in many respects, the Minneapolis thing. A lot of those businesses were minority-owned businesses that were burned to the ground. I haven't been through that area. I've talked to some people that have been through that area. It says it looks like a war zone. And truly, you know, that's probably one of those urban-rural divides. And one reason why rural Americans like us are kind of shaking our head and questioning and saying, what is going on? You know, why do you have to have, you know, 80 some nights of protesting in Portland and all of the destruction of the property that's going on there? What's happening in Kenosha, Wisconsin, which would be, you know, probably most people didn't know where it was at. I actually had to look it up on a map. I knew it was, you know, on Lake Michigan, but wasn't exactly sure where it was. I would consider Kenosha, Wisconsin, you know, a Midwestern, mid-sized city. You know, what's prompted the destruction there the last couple of days?
I think some of the tension is due to the pandemic and having shutdowns.
People out of
the idea of
not being able to go out.
People are in a rough spot to begin with, and so
Tension's high.
yeah,
Right.
I think just
Well, Brittany, you're a history teacher. Do you think there's maybe some historical context that might also be informing people's feelings right now?
Yeah, I think there is a lot of historical background. I think as somebody who's from one of the whitest counties in America, it's really hard for me to speak to any of that because it's not been my experience in any way, shape, or form. And like you were saying, like for us, it's like what's going on there because we are so far removed from it that it's hard to speak on those things or just really have any sort of context for it. But I mean, obviously there's been slavery and racism in America for a really long time. For us, it's hard to understand or to speak to it, being from where we're from and not really understanding those underlying tensions because we don't have them here.
Will, you spoke to the fact that you felt like there was a moment of unity at one point in which it seemed that people were kind of mutually outraged and felt like something should be done. Of the four of you, if you did share that experience, what do you think would have been a appropriate kind of measure or response to that?
I think one issue that's kind of been brought to light is the difficulty or how difficult it is to actually remove police officers that aren't doing an adequate job or are doing a very bad job. As you may know, the police are unionized, and from what I understand, generally, if you're union, you're pretty well protected if you're a union member. So it's not as easy as, hey, this is a bad cop, we need to fire him, because guess what? The union's protecting him. So, you know, specifically with maybe police reform, that might be something to address is there a number of complaints that, you know, is kind of a threshold or a limit to, at that point, you know, this officer can't just be put on desk duty, you know, because that's what from what I understand, seems to happen. If somebody makes too many mistakes, it's not like they're just let go; they're just kind of hidden.
and I'll also point out, a positive in this whole thing. After the George Floyd thing in Minneapolis, the Iowa legislature happened to be coming into session, following the pandemic. They took a break and then they came back. One of the first bills that was passed, I believe it was passed unanimously by both the Democrats and Republicans and signed by the governor, was a police reform bill in Iowa. So in Iowa, there were certain what you might call chokeholds that were immediately banned. There was certain, I'm sorry I haven't read the bill, but there were certain measures that were taken in regard to police departments to try to address some of these issues immediately, and it was passed in a bipartisan fashion.
I mean, overall, my opinion is to let each city deal with it in the way that they feel is best. I don't think that it's, again, I can speak to it, or it's my place to say how that should be done. If Minneapolis wants to try something radical and new, that's going to be on them, kind of thing. If that's what they want, they should be able to do it. And it's only really going to benefit me, because if something works, then great, and everyone can learn from it. And if something doesn't work, well, I mean, I would feel bad for the people of Minneapolis that it doesn't work, but it's not going to hurt me personally. I think overall people should get to do it how they want to do it.
I want to move a little bit into my last question for this evening, or last kind of arena, which is the election. If you do feel compelled around Trump, what would you say to an undecided voter to elicit their support for Trump as well?
The president has come through on the promises that he's made. He basically said, we're going to try to bring manufacturing home. We're going to take on China. He's done it. The president has said he was going to appoint conservative judges. He's done it. The president has said he was going to reduce regulation. He's done it. The president has said he was going to lower our tax burden. He's done it. The president has said we're going to make America great again. He's doing it. We're not going to play second fiddle to anyone around the world. I just believe that the things that he promised when he was running for president, he has delivered on, and that's the economy before the COVID-19 thing was humming along great, and I think if anybody can get this economy out of this COVID slump, it's the same president that got us the economy that we had before COVID-19. So there's no reason to change horses at this particular point. Joe Biden's been in politics for 47 years, and I think Trump's been president for 47 months or 45 months, and frankly, that's a great comparison. What's Joe Biden done in 47 years? Trump's done a lot in 47 months.
If I'm talking to an undecided conservative, somebody I know is Republican, and they're still undecided, the big point that I would try to drive home is whoever gets elected president is going to be nominating a Supreme Court judge within the next 4 years, most likely,
right.
Unless I don't see how Ruth Bader Ginsburg is going to, not that I don't wish her ill will. She's at that age that, it's very possible that she could pass away. Right. So if you're conservative, and you believe in judges that believe that support the Constitution, and will make decisions based on the Constitution, that's almost reason enough to, in my mind, to vote for Trump. A lot of conservatives who are undecided or who are kind of hesitant on Trump, they're apprehensive on Trump because of him personally, his personality. I guess what I would urge those people to do is vote for policy instead of for a person. because those people that don't like him, that have, whether they're pro-life. I mean, you can not like Donald Trump all you want, but if you're pro-life, it should be pretty clear who you should pick. If you're pro-Second Amendment, it's pretty clear who you should pick. If you're pro-strong American military or defense, I think it's clear who you should pick. I think the independents that are undecided, you probably have to focus more on the economy and on where it was before COVID, like my dad was saying. I think, I think a big thing that what I would probably try to illuminate is just the stark differences between the ideas of capitalism versus socialism or leaning socialism. The ideas of, do you believe in law and order? Do you believe, do you believe in defunding the police? Do you believe that it's, or do you condone destruction of property because you're not happy with the way things are? How would you like it if somebody came into your residential area and were, yelling things like "get out in the streets, mother," like they are in Portland, shining lasers into your house, being intimidating. Is that what you want for your country? I think it's pretty clear if that's not how you want it to be, then you should know who to vote for, I guess.
I'm
Brittany's undecided.
Yeah, I am that undecided voter, I guess. I mean, I would prefer a system without two people. I would prefer a 4-party or more system. I think there's a lot of issues we have with the 2-pony ride that we're on. So I don't know. I honestly don't. There's a lot of time before November, before we see.
She's going to wait until the last minute to see who really screws up.
Well, how much, you said the two of you had sort of mentioned vote policy as opposed to personality. Does personality is personality not a part of your decision-making process when it comes to Trump?
Politics is a blood sport.
Yes.
However, saying that, I long for a time when politics is more boxing than it is UFC. And I miss a time not too long ago when I believe it was more of a blood sport that had certain rules that both parties were willing to accept and abide by. The fact of the matter is that we're in an environment right now where a lot of the punches are below the belt. And I don't know how we're going to get back to defining a new set of, or a renewed set of rules that governs this particular blood sport. In some respects, what I'm saying is that, there are certain things that our president has said that I wish he would have not said. And those are still overridden by the policy decisions and the promises that were made and the promises that were kept. Donald Trump was elected because of Barack Obama. And in our conversation we had a year ago, I think we talked a little bit about the Obama administration. It was, when you look back at it now, hindsight 2020, it was the ultimate response. President Trump was the ultimate response to 8 years of the Obama administration. So to my Democrat friends, we survived 8 years of President Obama, I'm sure they can survive 8 years of Donald Trump. And the reality of it is the reason that they have to survive the 8 years of Donald Trump is because of, frankly, President Obama, who they elected. So you know, we'll get out of this funk at some point, and the campaigns and the candidates will have a different air and a different direction, still talking about the same policy issues. But right now it's a dogfight, and we're just there, and we're going to have to stay there for a while, I think.
I think that's like one of my biggest things is I feel that both parties are more concerned about making the other party look like horrible people than they are with doing what's best for people. I think it's all about polarizing people to get into a camp so that they can win versus actually coming together to do things for the American people. I mean, like the stimulus bill, right, that they can't decide on because both sides are not going to give in to the other one, and they can't pass pieces of it because they want to hold on to these cards and they want to make it look like, oh, if you're Republican, you're homophobic and you know, are just this horrible person. And if you're a liberal, then you're just this communist person, you know, like I think most people don't fall into those categories. And I think that's, like you were saying, the blood sport, the getting people to hate each other. And you see it, I think online it has really exasperated that too, that people are just arguing and hitting below the belt and things like that people aren't focusing on what could we come together and do. They're focusing on how can I get reelected? How can I make the other side look bad?
I guess my final question is, if somebody was liberal and watching, what would you say as people who identify as conservatives or libertarians, perhaps? What do you think is the main misconception that liberals might have about conservatives or libertarians?
That we don't give a damn, because we really care about humanity. We just view the structure that supports our family and our country. We view a different structure in order to come to the same goals of supporting our family, raising our kids, giving them a good education, giving them an opportunity to succeed, and we care about people that aren't as fortunate as we may be. And a lot of times, I think liberals tend to think that conservatives don't care about other people. We're just self-centered.
Right. I think that comes down to where you want those programs coming from. Like personally, I think that the community level or somewhat at the state level, programs are better or can be better enacted and can help more people than federal programs. And so generally, I wouldn't support necessarily a big federal program because I don't think it's going to help as many people as a community program for the people that are around that actually, know the needs of the community. And so I think a lot of times it gets thrown of like, you don't want to help people, but it's more of I think the community should help people, or I should think like that should be done, in different places like the schools or the churches or things like that. And so I think that is a big misconception of like, if you don't support this, you don't want these people to have these things. And it's not necessarily that. I think a lot of times for conservatives, it's just, I just don't believe that it's the government's job to do so.
Yeah. To expand on that, conservatives don't support or don't generally support welfare system, the government welfare system, not because they don't care about the recipients. The reason that it's not supported by conservatives is because we don't believe that it does a good job. I think that, there's studies that show that that private charities garner better results. Their studies show that conservatives they give more of what they earn to charities, whether it be a church or private organizations. So yeah, there is this misconception that because conservatives are generally against state welfare, that they don't want to take care of people or help people. We just believe that the state or the federal government doesn't actually do that. Throwing money at the problem is in many cases making it worse. It's you're making somebody dependent. The other misconception is that that conservatives are racist, that we're homophobic, warmongering is I think a misconception.
I think another one that kind of gets me is that conservatives are not educated. That like they're just a bunch of backwoods hillbilly sort of people, and I think that that's an unfair sort of.
Ironically, there is that misconception, and there is also the misconception that conservatives are wealthy.
Yeah.
How is that? It's interesting.
I appreciate you all taking the time tonight and talking to me, and all the time that you took last year too. It means a lot that you would, even though we have different political views, that we can find a way to come together and have a nice civilized conversation where, we share in a compassionate way and in an articulate way. So thank you for articulating your points of view to me tonight.
Yeah, whatever.
Next time on Home Again. In our final episode, I interviewed Travis Charlson, my director of photography on the project, who returned home after college to work for our town's local paper. Travis shares what he learned through this project and his take on this last year's events. All this and more in the final episode of Home Again, Conversations from the Heartland.